I would have totally forgiven you if, in place of the list for topics to go over for today's episode, we just had a picture of a tumbleweed.
This time we watched Season 3, Episode 8, Gamera versus Gaos. Gaos.
This Gamera is fast becoming our Vietnamera.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. But first, some follow-up.
Yes. So one of the things we talked about at length, both in the episode proper and in our Patreon bonus bit, was the Jack Benny program.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, same here. But one of the things that popped into my head a little while ago was reading a review of a long-forgotten movie called The Jet Benny Show.
Okay, that sounds promising, I think.
Yes, which as far as I understand is a space opera, but one of the guys is doing a Jack Benny impression the entire time as, I don't know, Rocket Ranger Jet Benny. I don't know if there is a Rochester robot, which naturally would be called Robochester.
So have you seen the Jet Benny show?
No, I only just discovered that it was on YouTube in what looked like not watchable quality. I was really hoping, and again, I haven't watched it, so maybe this does happen, but he, pulls up an alien on the view screen communicator, and the first thing the alien says is, yes.
Oh, I hope so.
Because while this is perhaps not the best idea for a full-length movie, I would totally watch a sketch that was just the Jet Benny program if they wanted to kill 10 minutes on SNL, like right after 12,
Well, I see that somebody else, the same person has put up the Jet Benny show favorite clips. So if you just want 4.5 minute taster, they have that available as well.
Oh, a sampler's platter.
But I don't know. Maybe I'll watch the whole thing. I do like me some Jack Benny, and we'll see how terrible it is. It looks like the video quality is like a KTMA episode.
Oh, no. Hopefully not like the last one we watched. I will say this. It's like, what could be better than the Jack Benny program, Jack Benny in space? And, worst comes to worst, the Jet Benny show will probably be on par with, I don't know, Gilligan's Planet, that animated series where the castaways end up on a rocket ship and then they end up marooned on a planet.
I don't know anything about this one.
It came around right at the time of Laverne and Shirley in the Army.
Oh, my God.
If I recall correctly. Because nothing says support our troops. Like Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Haas and Pfeffer Incorporated.
Let's see if that's on YouTube.
It probably is. Who would copyright strike that?
Oh, yeah, there's a whole playlist. Oh, it's all been deleted.
Oh.
It was a cartoon.
Yeah.
There's 1 or 2 episodes still left, but a lot of it has been deleted.
Wow, that surprises me. That thing probably has less rewatch value than the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Listeners, as you can tell, in this our 6th Gamera episode, we are stretching. We are stretching our material. So I hope you enjoy the back and forth, the chitter chatter, the nonsense, because you might get an extra heaping helping of that today.
Basically, what Chris and I are doing, even though we can't see each other, is that we're each doing that stretch gesture that they do whenever you see a movie or a TV show set in old-timey radio. And a frenzy producer is just like, ah. Oh, but speaking of stretching things, I do have some info to stretch in regards to the Gamera picture that we were talking about. Now, last time we were talking about how there is a Gamera song in Gamera versus Gaos, albeit only in the original Japanese version.
Right.
But it's not the Gamera song.
No. But it's still good.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's just, it's one of those things where it's like, if you've had the vacation experience of a lifetime and then, your next trip is to go see, I don't know, Scenic Corner Brook or something. It's like something relatively non-exciting. You're going to a box factory. It is, apologies to Quarterbrook, but there's it's a come down. It's come down when that there's better Gamera songs out there. However, they clearly put all their hopes on this Gamera song because it was issued as a single in addition to being in the movie.
Of course. I would expect no less.
Yes. So back in the 60s, there were plenty, I assume, of bargain bins at the record store full of the 7-inch of the other Gamera song.
Look, if they can make a read-along book to Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, there's no reason why they wouldn't make the catchy song at the end of Gamera versus Gaos into a hit single.
You know, and who knows, maybe they improved it, much like the Santa Claus Conquers the Martians record.
Do you have the title of the song?
The title of the song is... I have it here somewheres. Let me bring up my Gamera folder where I keep all of my Gamera information. It is called, this may shock you, Song of Gamera, specifically single version. And apparently the B-side was a track called Combat Between Gamera and Gaos, single version.
So that was like a rap battle.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe they threw in some sound effects over that one. I haven't listened to that yet.
All right. Well, if we can find the lyrics translated online, we'll put a link in the show notes.
And you too may sing along to the English translation of that other Gamera song.
All right. Let's get to talking about the movie properly, hey?
If we must.
We are contractually obligated to.
This time we watched Gamera vs. Gaos, the Comedy Central edition. After the typical and typically out-of-place somber ocean credits of the Sandy Frank Gamera dubs, we get right to the action. If by action you mean a land dispute between Stern guys. Yes, there's a conflict between those trying to build a new expressway, which is planned to go right through precious farmland, thus robbing farmers of their land and income. Maybe it's just the Sandy Frank dub here, but the farmers are depicted as greedy no-goodniks, laughing about how they'll extort many a pretty penny from the innocent expressway. Oh, and there's a lot of concern about live volcanoes, as Gamera's trying to keep warm during the harsh cold of Gamuary by hanging around Mount Fuji. As a research crew tries to investigate Gamera, they fly near a cave that's emitting a gaudy green light. Is it Gamera's man cave, where he keeps all his old issues of Swank away from Mrs. Gamera? No, it's the hiding spot of a bat-like creature who seems like the harder-edged sibling to Toho Studios' Pteranodon kaiju, Rodan. The bat creature uses its heat beam to split the helicopter in two, killing a dozen or so researchers who are expecting to find Gamera at the heart of Mount Fuji. An enterprising reporter, hoping to get some answers on the destruction of the helicopter, tries to trick a young boy to take him near the crash site. The boy, interested in stopping anyone from completing the expressway or starting any construction, is goaded into being shown around the area when the reporter suggests that Gamera might be found nearby. The boy is surprisingly not named Kenny. This is Ichi, or Aichi, but the type of boys in these movies are usually called Kenny, so let's just call him that. And now a PSA, young listeners, especially those of you in short pants. If a stranger tries to take you away from your family under promise of meeting Gamera, just say no. Anywho, the film's designated Kenny and the reporter end up at that cave that has that glowing green light that looks like a Joel Schumacher Batman. And, well, that sounds like Gamera territory, right? Gamera's green? No, wrong. The bat creature from earlier is hiding out there, and he quickly devours the reporter. The bat creature tries to devour the Kenny, but he's stopped by Gamera, the flying turtle who is friend to children everywhere. And with a great deal more respect for the audience's patience than Gamera versus Baragon, the two beasts start fighting relatively early in the film's runtime. Things get pretty bleak as the bat creature cuts through Gamera's right arm with a laser beam. Wounded and needing to protect his new Kenny, Gamera places Ichi on his back, acting like a giant turtle taxi, and he takes the boy home. Well, it takes a rescue team to get the boy off the turtle's back before Gamera flies away again. Kenny dubs the bat creature Gaos, based on the creature's language, but I'm pretty sure Gaos actually means the village, the people. Anyway, there's some pontificating about Gaos' origins by boring old guys who always pontificate about where kaiju come from in these movies. No matter, this is a love story between a boy and a giant turtle, so Gamera hides away in the ocean, while Aichi worries about the kaiju's health. Gaos attacks once again, showing up in Nagoya, wrecking the city and hassling train commuters. Somewhere Godzilla is owed a royalty check. Anywho, a newly healed Gamera returns and weakens Gaos by keeping him in the sun, the bat creature's one weakness. Well, that and Gamera's teeth, as the Titanic tortoise rips Gaos' foot off before it flies away. Gaos returns to his cave and tends to his wounds, and, in a nicely icky effect, his foot completely regenerates. Scientists examining Gaos' severed foot when it washes ashore determine ultraviolet rays might hinder the creature or cause him to shrink or something. So the scientists, with the aid of our designated Kenny, plan to lure Gaos to a revolving restaurant and distract the bat till it gets blasted with ultraviolet rays. To do so, they turn the restaurant into a blood fountain. No, really, that's what happens. Scientists have developed an ooze, and the secret of the ooze is that it smells and tastes just like human blood. The blood restaurant works on Gaos until the sun comes up. But oh no, they've lost power. Of course, you knew this movie would end with one last kaiju big battle, and Gamera does show up and finish the job. The Earth is saved until the next monster shows up. Oh, and the expressway thing is sorted out when the farmers decide to sell their land after all. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, we begin, as so often, with everyone on the Satellite of Love doing impressions of their favorite gravel-voiced celebrities. Lucille Ball, Harvey Weinstein, Brenda Vaccaro, Burgess Meredith, David Jansen, and Kim Carnes. Remember how in the last episode we looked at Joel compared Gypsy's voice to Kim Carnes? But Gypsy's voice sounds so much different now, 3 years later. So Gypsy does her impression of the opening of the NBC Sunday Night Mystery Movie, a joke that the show would later ban. Invention exchange time. The Mads have these printers that they wear like giant sandwich boards, and they're wearing helmets with diodes attached to their heads, and the whole gimmick is that it prints out the wearer's self-image. Okay, so Frank imagines himself as a clown, whereas Dr. Forrester thinks of himself as Miss Ohio in a bikini. Yep, that checks out. Joel, on the other hand, came up with a combination Kleenex dispenser fax machine. Linus Pauling faxes up the cure for the common cold, but Joel sneezes into it. Wah wah. Between the dot matrix screeches of the Mads printers and Joel's fax jokes, it's getting real 90s in here. Segment 2 starts with Joel trying to show you how to make a craftsy version of Gaos, but the bots keep razzing him until Joel finally has to give Tom a timeout. While they're away, commercial sign goes off, and Crow asks if he should get it. But instead of hitting the button, he lets the audience know.
Hey kids, the word for today is booger. Yeah, that's right, booger. Booger, 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 booger. Wah!
Segment 3 has the SOL elaborately staged for a production of the Wagnerian opera, Gamera Damerung. But just as soon as it starts up, it's movie sign. What a waste. But what about segment 4? It starts with Tom trying to get a toy dog to jump through a hoop, which it refuses to do. And hey, wait a minute, Tom's arm is working. It's moving that hoop back and forth. Huh. Anyway, turns out this is the Ed Sullivan Show, with Crow doing a great Ed Sullivan. And Joel is Gaos the Great, doing his amazing plate spinning act. Except it turns out Joel has never spun plates before. He just assumed he could? Tom is coaching him on, and his arm still works. Well, wonders never cease. After the movie, the bots are not impressed with the humans' attempts to get rid of Gaos within this film, and Joel encourages them to come up with their own ideas. Crows are a little too obvious for Joel and Tom's liking, so as they start conspiring without him, Crow invites the audience to write in with their own suggestions. Frank and Dr. Forrester have some ideas. Do you?
It's funny. I always thought of Heart to Heart as a Robert Wagnerian opera.
You mentioned Mrs. Gamera in your summary.
Mm-hmm.
And now obviously we know that Gamera only has eyes for the various Kennys.
Unfortunately.
I know. But
that's a tough pill to swallow.
But it's a chaste love. But I'm wondering who you would set Gamera up with.
If I were to set Gamera up with any monster, I would think that he would be perfect to have. There's a giant walrus in one of the Toho movies. It might be Gorath, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure there's a giant walrus. And I think a turtle and a walrus, they both have tusks, so they both know that it would be difficult to kiss, but they could probably make amends for it, and or they could probably make plans for it, and handle it as well as two kids with braces. And they both know the sea. They've got tons of stuff in common, and they're both the last thing that you would think of when making a giant monster.
having done a little internet research, I think you're thinking of Magma from the film Gorath.
Yes. In fact, the first thing that comes up when you Google Gorath Walrus, or in my case, because I was typing very quickly, I wrote Gorath Whalewus. The first hit is a YouTube video that says, All Magma Scenes Gorath 1962.
He looks adorable. He looks adorable, this Magma.
Yeah, he's got a certain charm. So as a Magma could become a mama to these turtle walrus hybrids.
Well, anyway, Comedy Central version of this is easier to watch than the KTMA. Although, good God, what isn't?
Well, that was a bit like trying to watch adult movies on pay-per-view that you didn't pay for, so you just feverishly masturbated to Squiggles, Chris. It was like watching an erotic adventure of Dr. Katz.
Well, I'm not saying I wouldn't watch that.
Yeah.
But also, the sound is much better.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't necessarily mean that the film was 100% easier to follow, but it was much better, I thought.
Yeah. And I guess one thing to note is we had mentioned how there was like a little bit of not so nice kibitzing about Japanese names in the KTMA episode. And sure enough, that's here too.
Yes, more so.
Yes, and then that was surprising. It's like, oh, maybe they would just get that out of their system for the KTMA episode. As they decided to write jokes, that wouldn't show up. But if you're familiar with this show, whenever there's a Japanese movie, they lean into that usually.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It is one of the unfortunate side effects of the early years of the show. Or I think most of the show, honestly, whenever they did a Japanese movie. But at least they hang a lampshade on it when I think it's Tom who asks. It's like, hey, do you think the Japanese people make fun of American names?
Yeah, Joel asks that. Tom says, they probably do.
Fair enough. It's a good question. It's a good question while writing a questionable bit.
Indeed. And what did you think of the segments?
The segments, I would say, are the standouts here because we get off to a magnificent start with the impressions of raspy-voiced people. Ricky. And it had, for me, the best part is at the very, very end where Joel joins in on it because that's the only way you can communicate with bots now. And he said, he completely botches the line. What was the person's name?
Brenda Vaccaro.
Brenda Vaccaro, yes, because he goes Brenda Vaccaro is on line 2. And of course the response is, I only take calls from Burgess Meredith. And it's ending with all of them just going, and Magic Voice joins in. And whoever was voicing Magic Voice prior to Mary Jo doing it from like season 4 onwards, is always had this funny, chirpy delivery, so that this like sweet and innocent voice is also doing it. It just adds to the joke. It's very, very charming.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite part of it. Was Magic Voice's commercial sign in 10, 9, 8 commercial sign now. So good.
I think she throws in an as well. It's a great segment, especially if you love vocal fry.
Here's the thing. I don't remember Lucille Ball's voice ever getting as deep as they like to do it on this show.
I don't either, but you know what? You and I probably were not paying attention to TV for the final projects of Lucille Ball, like Life with Lucy, I think was the last one she did.
No, it's true. I have barely seen any of the post I Love Lucy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I did watch it a little bit after watching MST3K back when I was a kid because I was curious to sort of fact check the Ricky, turns out I was never funny kind of jokes. It's like I never heard her sound anything like that. But you know, if you know where I should look to hear Lucille Ball sounding like that, please write into It's Just a Show info at itsjustashow.com.
But that I think was great. But also what follows that sketch is a contender just for Frank's lines. When Frank has to describe himself, he just spews out this snowball of cliche.
Yes.
And he does it with such such like deadpan irony in the way that like TV's Frank can sound extremely sincere, but Frank Conniff is clearly being quite salty. And it's like, oh, it's cute yet devastating in the way the best SCTV sketches are, where it's like, oh, they're being really mean, but in like a kid show way.
Yes. Yeah, no, both Frank and Dr. Forrester's lines as they are having their self-image printed out in front of them are just amazing speeches that are sort of delightfully vacuous in different ways.
Yeah.
And they nail it.
It's one of the cases where, like, the setup is funnier than the punchline, honestly.
Absolutely. Although I do enjoy seeing these sort of dot matrix printouts that are taped together from various pieces of paper, because obviously they're not going to be able to afford to have actual large print things done. That's very expensive, especially back in the 90s. So yeah, they figured out something with, I don't know whether they actually use Print Shop for this or something else, but boy, they taped a bunch of pieces of paper together with pretty good accuracy to make those large clown and Miss Ohio images.
I wonder if they were ever tempted to have one of the printers print out, "I hate Tom Servo's new voice."
So on the scale of least cute to most cute Gamera monster, where would you place Gaos?
I would say that Gaos is strictly in the middle. He has a cool slant head, but it's not very cute. It's more rad because like I would totally picture if Gaos was not a famous monster, or not even famous by North American standards, but if Gaos was not a pop culture creature, I could totally see there being just cool posters with him on it and every kid in the 80s wanting one. You look like you could skateboard off him.
Are you not swayed by the scientist in the movie who declares with a weird line drawing that, of course, Gaos has two throats?
I mean, that sounds like a monster I want to date, but
oh boy,
not necessarily cute.
I do love that scene, though. I do love when the scientist is explaining Gaos to people, and there's no way that the scientist could have figured any of this out or even made the drawings, but he puts up a drawing of Gaos and then a drawing of Gaos with sort of a skeleton, like how Gaos works on the inside. And he's got the two throats because he doesn't turn his head, which is a really good excuse to not have the costume have to turn its head.
Yeah, what's funny is that, like, it's totally illogical, and yet it's perfect kid logic. It's perfect kid logic because, of course, a scientist would understand these things and be able to break down the biology of the creature that, in reality, he would have no idea about. They don't X-ray Gaos at any point in the movie.
Yeah. Scientists just know things randomly. It's total kid logic. It's like how your teacher knows things, but how?
Yeah.
They just know things.
So it's charming. I enjoyed that. In terms, going back to your questions, in terms of the cuteness scale, I would say that Gaos is cuter than Zigra, but not as cute as Barugan, and of course, the cutest of all, Guiron.
Yes. Well, and Gamera's got to fit in there somewhere too.
Yeah, I would say, well, Gamera's probably closer to Gaos than Guiron, if I'm being honest. Gamera's all right. Gamera's all right, but he's no Guiron, and he lacks the doofy charm of Barugan.
So one of the things that scene with the scientist presenting the line drawings made me think of is sort of the design process for coming up with these monsters. Because obviously they must have started as sort of pencil sketch doodles, sort of like what the scientist shows off as accurate truth. So do you know anything about that process, about how kaiju came to be and how they picked out which were the good ideas and which were not the good ideas, or anything like that?
Well, that was kind of the fun thing, is that for the most part, in terms of what the makers of this original run of Gamera movies talked about when coming up with sequels, is that unlike the original Gamera, it was never a story-based thing, because Gamera started off, someone had the bright idea over at Dai Studios that he had a fantasy about a tortoise being in the clouds, a giant tortoise, while he was on an airplane. He was like, we should make a movie about that. And fair enough, that was an idea pitched to script. Whereas the other monsters that are in these movies, they talked about coming up with designs before they came up with a script.
Right.
So they would try to figure out, it's like, what would be an interesting thing? And as was revealed in the documentary, a lot of this came from high pressure situations of not only do they have to turn these movies around relatively quickly, but they're getting so much pressure from the marketing department about like what are the features of this monster so that we can sell it, so we can have like bright ad copy saying the monster does this, Gaos can fly around and shoots laser beams and feasts on human blood, all sorts of fun details that you can put in. So the things never came from a script. Usually it came from the design department. I don't know if that's still how they do things for modern day kaiju films.
Oh, who cares about modern day kaiju films?
We're stuck in the 60s.
So what documentary are you talking about?
Oh, there was a documentary, I think, for television that united all of the Gamera folks who were surviving. I think this was done in the 90s to coincide with the release of the first Gamera reboot movie, Gamera Guardian of the Universe, beloved by Roger Ebert.
Okay.
whose review confirms what we all know about Gamera when Roger Ebert wrote, "Yes, children, Gamera is powered by farts." But the interesting thing is, while doing a bit of research for the Gamera movies and watching that documentary, they talk about one of the two movies I know of that is an unmade Gamera movie. They talk about a planned sequel to Gamera that they simply never filmed, that all the original folks had thought about.
Gamera Conquers the Martians.
I think Gamera versus Santa Claus is far more appealing.
Yeah, fair enough.
The first one, and the one they talk about in the documentary, is a film that is called Gamera versus Garasharp. Now, what kind of monster do you think a Garasharp is?
A pointy one?
No.
And a garish one?
Well, they're all garish, so points for that.
Fair enough. It's another knife monster. It's like an octopus, but with knives instead of tentacles.
You're not too far off in the sense that, well, Chris, what is a tentacle if not an appendage that looks like a snake?
What? Okay.
And this snake had horns and fangs.
Huh.
So that was Garasharp. Garasharp was a big serpent.
Could it fly or something?
As far as I can tell, the plans for Garasharp is that it would slither around.
Seems unspectacular. If it doesn't have much height, could it at least rear up?
Well, that's just it. It was a giant snake. If nothing else, was a giant snake.
So it was Dune. They were making Dune.
Yeah, which explains why Kyle MacLachlan was cast as Gamera for this film. Sadly, it never came to pass.
So we got a giant snake who's going to destroy some Japanese city.
And there's at least a cool visual there in that Garasharp was planned to come into a major city and wrap his whole body around tall buildings and crush them.
Okay.
Which hasn't been done, to my knowledge. I know that there's a monster named Manda, I think, that is a giant snake from the Toho studios, but I don't recall him wrapping himself up around a building in Destroy All Monsters. I could be wrong. Or maybe it's Vanda. Or maybe it's Varan the Unbelievable. Sometimes Toho monsters. I know it's not Spiga.
Manda's a sea monster.
Is it a serpent?
It's not a serpent.
Okay, then we're going to say it's
It looks like an Eastern dragon, it says.
Watching these movies for Gamera slowly caused our minds to dribble out of our ears. So listeners, apologies. But yes, so Garasharp, he was going to wrap around buildings, crush the buildings, and the amazing thing is Gamera was going to come to the rescue. How is Garasharp, who is quite sharp, as I mentioned, he has a horn and he has big toofs. How is Garasharp going to defend himself, Chris?
With laser beams.
No.
It works really well.
No. He Frenches Gamera.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that's honestly what happens. They describe it as Garasharp's tongue shoots out of his body, goes down Gamera's throat, and he sucks Gamera's life force. That's their words, not mine. I really hope that the planned visual was that Gamera was slowly going to turn white. But that's what was going to plan. So naturally, as per the act conflict in all of these movies, Gamera was going to fly away and make a miraculous recovery for round 2.
Yeah, that's what he does.
So Gamera's not going to wrestle. He's not going to bite. He's going to try to keep his mouth far, far away from Garasharp for round 2. And he uses his flames but that's actually Gaos Sharp's secret weapon because flames make him grow bigger.
Oh, he's a fire snake.
Yeah. So I don't know what kind of Pokemon that makes him. Flamey snakes. But Gaos Sharp then would unleash a combustible gas, which I think Gaos does. And Gaos Sharp would do the same, but it's highly combustible. And of course, the entire city of whatever city they planned on destroying for this movie was going to be set on fire. So that would at least also be like a cool visual where this whole metropolitan area would be in flames. I assume this would have had a much larger budget than Gamera versus Gaos.
Right.
And the two kaijus would be battling in this kind of ring of fire. That's kind of neat.
Sure.
But thanks to human intervention, Gaos Sharp, he accidentally swallows some explosives, and Gamera knows this. So he ignites the explosives with his fire breath, and then Gaos Sharp explodes.
Oh, yeah, that works.
Now, Chris, does that sound like the end of the movie?
No. Now it's like a Hydra. You're going to have a million little Gaos Sharps.
Yes! There are 2 baby Gaos Sharps that emerge.
Yeah.
And the military attacks, but to no avail. And the reason why is, do you think that the military would have any success in terms of the weapons they have to kill at least some baby Gaos Sharps?
They're going to use flamethrowers. They haven't been paying attention to the scientists. They're too proud.
Well, here's the thing. Regardless of what they were going to try to use, Gamera saves the 2 baby Gaos Sharps from the army.
Oh.
Yeah.
For a sequel.
Well, he drops them off on an uncharted island. Gamera knows where to go. It's probably one of Marlon Brando's islands.
Right.
But he drops them off there, rips the teeth out of their heads.
Ooh.
And rips their horns off.
Sure.
And then flies away. And we were supposed to be left with the impression that this is a happy ending because the 2 baby Gaos Sharps are just thrilled that Gamera saved their lives. The end. Presumably they die horribly because they have no natural defense. So Gamera versus Gaos Sharp, I just get the impression that was like later in the series. Like perhaps it would have been the follow-up to what ended up being the final Gamera film of the original series, but before the 1980 Space Monster Gamera or Super Monster Gamera or whatever the hell that clip show is called.
Mm-hmm.
But the original sequel to Gamera, rather than Gamera versus Barugan, now, they weren't going to do Barugan, so we have to wonder, Chris, what would the kaiju be that you would think is the most logical thing for Gamera to fight?
Barugan.
Actually, that would be the crossover sensation. Because Barugan has floppity ears and a scratchety tum-tum.
Oh, yeah.
Is the most adorable of all monsters. He would be number 1 on any kaiju cuteness contest.
Okay, so who would be the most logical thing to fight a giant fire turtle?
Well, you nailed it just there. Think about it. Gamera is fire, so naturally you bring ice.
Oh, I was going to say water.
Oh, well, yeah. Although, what would it be? Just a big fireman?
Or foam. It could have been foam. One of those, fire repellent foams that you use sometimes.
they just cover Gamera in like flame retardant material and asbestos.
Well, no, it would be a monster that would emit the foam. It would be a foam monster, like what used to be in the bathtub when you had too much Mr. Bubble. It would be Mr. Bubble.
Well, that would be very tempting, and I think Gamera versus Mr. Bubble has a chance, especially because there hasn't been a Gamera movie in 13 years. Well, 14, I guess, as of 2020.
It's been even longer since there's been a Mr. Bubble movie.
It's true. His scenes got cut from Food Fight when they realized Mr. Bubble was inedible.
Okay, so it's an ice creature.
Yeah. The plan was for a movie called Gamera versus the Iceman. Because if you remember at the end of Gamera 1, the very first Gamera, they send Gamera out into space via Plan Z or Plan Z for Canadians.
Right.
And either maybe the space aliens knock Gamera off course, maybe Gamera being launched into space attracts their attention to Earth. I don't know. But space invaders, they were going to come down. They were going to wreak havoc on Earth. But since they plunge Earth into permanent ice, and of course, Gamera's home is Earth. Gamera's shift to a hero, he's being forced to because he has to protect Earth rather than people. So he's off to defrost Earth, and I guess all the buildings would be perfectly intact since Gamera would set them on fire. But he would try to defeat the aliens, but what the aliens had was an ice giant that would fight Gamera.
Oh, yes.
And so you basically had Gamera versus the Yeti.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. As far as I can tell, I mean, like, I haven't seen a design for what the Iceman would be, and that was just a placeholder title anyway, because I don't think it got that far before they decided to go with Barugon. But
was it going to be played by a giant Burl Ives?
I would hope so.
As a giant snowman? That's what I want to see.
That instead of the Gamera song, you would just get a Japanese version of I'm Mr. Heat Miser.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
And so, yeah, I guess Gamera, would have broken free of his Plan Z rocket when some kid got frozen into a Kennysicle, and he was forced to break his exile and return home, and thus defeat the Martians, and as a result, becoming Earth's champion, and people start loving him, as they inexplicably do as of Gamera versus Barugon.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. Somehow we've dug up 13 more tidbits about Gamera versus Gaos. Because we love you, listener. Go, Chris, go!
The original title for this movie was Gamera vs. Vampire. Now, you'll remember that the revised title of The Wild Wild World of Batwoman was She Was a Hippie Vampire. In some universe, we could have watched Gamera vs. Batwoman. I know who I would root for.
Let's play a few rounds of what else did they do? For example, Kojiro Hongo, the actor playing the foreman for the expressway in Gaos, also played the lead Keisuke in Gamera vs. Barugon. Remember Keisuke? I don't.
The old village leader is played by Kiichiro Ueda. He appeared in 7 Akira Kurosawa films, including The Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, The Hidden Fortress, and Rashomon. Wait, he was in Rashomon? That's not how I remember it.
Reiko Kasahara, appearing here as the granddaughter of the head villager, would later appear in Gamera vs. Zigra and Gamera vs. Guiron.
Eiji Arkeni is played by Naoyuki Abe. Abe bore such a resemblance to the director Noriaki Yuasa that staff at Dai criticized him for nepotism in casting the part. To our knowledge, despite the resemblance, neither Aichi nor any other Kenny is played by the secret love child of any Gamera director.
So why did MST3K decide to riff these Gamera movies one more time? According to Jim Mallon, it's because they became fond of the old turtle. Those around for the KTMA days had a certain nostalgia for how silly the films were, and combined with the difficulty in getting good riffable movies in the early days of Comedy Central and the increased episode order for Season 3, revisiting all 5 Gameras seemed like a good idea at the time.
Tom suggests Gaos change his name to Ginsu, but diehard fans know that if any Gamera foe should be named Ginsu, it's Giron, the goofy alligator shark hybrid who has a head shaped like a knife. We'll see this amazingly silly beast in, what else, Gamera vs. Giron, the best Gamera episode, but again, in the year 2022. Sit tight.
Mike provides some information with the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide for Gamera vs. Gaos. And I quote, "For whatever reason, Toolmaster Jeff Maynard asked the writers to go light on props as they wrote the sketches for Gamera vs. Gaos. Maybe he wanted to sleep that week, I don't know. We took this very seriously and decided to write a sketch where we never really got to the sketch at all. It would use props we already have lying around, and best of all, it would be very funny. Somehow the sketch we never got around to involved the Götterdämmerung, which needed some fairly heavy costuming, and also we'd need a Deus Ex Machina, which would actually lower from above, and a curtain and some special lighting. I believe Jeff actually ended up putting in around 400 hours that week."
And for those curious about the soundtrack, Mike Nelson wrote the plate spinning music for the Ed Sullivan parody in segment 4, which is titled Opus 4, number 23, Plate Spinning Song.
In segment 2, Crow tells the kids the word of the day is booger.
Yeah, that's right. Booger. Booger, 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 booger.
Does booger seem like all that bad a word to you in the future year of 2020? We must recall that in more innocent times, that word could get you into trouble. In the pilot episode of beloved MTM sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati, Dr. Johnny Fever's backstory is that he got fired from a previous radio station for saying booger on the air. When the easy listening format of WKRP is changed to an all-rock format, Fever's first order of business is to scream booger, once again, on the air.
We mentioned last time that Joel shushed Tom Servo for being a little too eager about his new name. Well, Joel's shushing again, this time because Crow tells a joke that kinda goes over the line, making fun of Japanese accents. Come on, Crow, you're better than this.
Crow, as Ed Sullivan, insults Joel's pathetic plate-spinning routine by saying,
You guys are worse than Alan and Rossi.
Marty Allen and Steve Rossi were a comedy duo. Well, Allen was the comedian with the crazy hair, and Rossi was the straight man / singer. They performed in the late 50s into the 60s, and were best known for their catchphrase, "Hello there."
And finally, the movie opens with Mount Fuji erupting. Mount Fuji is, of course, a picture-perfect mountain and an iconic symbol of Japan, but it's also an active volcano, only 100 kilometers away from Tokyo. But don't worry, the last time it erupted was in the early 1700s. I'm sure it's not due to erupt again anytime soon.
And that's time.
So at some point in this episode, there's a dramatic sequence in which Gaos stands up, and he stretches out his wings, and Crow says,
I'm Batman.
So, how convenient. Because we left off our Batman story 2 episodes ago, having just made our way through the 1989 Batman and the sequel, Batman Some More.
That's where he makes s'mores.
Yeah. And I believe that was about to lead up to the next era of Batmanery.
Yes, and so we end up in, I guess, the unofficial Bat Corner.
I told you it was going to be a Batman trilogy. We just had a gap.
But yes, that would bring us to the final chunk of the 90s Batmania with Batman Forever and Batman and Robin under the directorial prowess of one Joel Schumacher.
Now, if I have heard one thing about these movies, and I have, it's that at least Batman and Robin certainly is not very good.
Now, the rumors are true. So we're continuing there with the standard thing. We have Batman in black leather, and we have celebrity guest villains.
Oh, wait, I think I know another thing about these movies.
Ooh.
Are these the ones where Batman has prominent nipples?
Yes, we are now in the Bat nipple era.
Great, okay.
Because that was Joel Schumacher's first order of business, was not only giving the Batsuits nipples, but we get so many Italian spaghetti western zoom-ins on the batch of both Val Kilmer and George Clooney in these movies. But yes, the first of these is Batman Forever. And what's funny is that when this came out, it was a huge success. There was a lot of talk about Batman Forever revitalizing the franchise after the box office disappointment of Batman Returns, and also, for some people, sour feelings about just how dark and grim Batman Returns is. Even though as a kid, I totally loved it for that reason, and still have kind of a quirky respect for it for being as weird as it is. Even though it's not a good Batman movie.
Right.
But Batman Forever was the combination of light and dark, or more accurately, the combination of the basics of Tim Burton's visual style combined with lots and lots of neon.
Right. I'm looking at the posters here for those two movies, and both of them are sort of diagonally divided. And on one side of the diagonal, you've got the sort of gray and black Batman. And on the other side, you've got lots and lots of color with the Riddler and Catwoman and whoever else are in these.
That is not reflective of the movie.
Oh.
Because the movie, because there's so much Batman on that poster, you'd think Batman is the star of the movie. Batman is not the star of any of those 4 movies.
Oh, I see.
He's once again overshadowed by villains. But at the very least, with Batman Returns, which was the first movie to have multiple villains in terms of the modern, or the once modern Batman era, the Burton Schumacher era, is that, woof, you've got Jim Carrey at the height of his fame playing the Riddler, and inexplicably you have Tommy Lee Jones playing Two-Face.
Oh.
And casting Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face is not the worst idea in the world if you're going to do a straight-laced and potentially scary Batman movie. Because, of course, Two-Face has been mutilated by acid, which was thrown in his face by a mobster. And He's now split in personality, and he is making decisions based on the flip of a coin.
Huh.
And, he's a great villain. He's a really great villain. They did wonderful stuff with him on the animated series where he was played by Bull from Night Court.
Oh, yeah, excellent.
Yeah. But Tommy Lee Jones definitely got the message that this movie was going to be silly and fun. And so the hilarious Tommy Lee Jones treats us to the comedy stylings of Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh, boy.
It is an unbearable performance. But the movie's lost a critical thing. It's no longer got Michael Keaton as Batman. It's got Val Kilmer. And Tommy Lee Jones made me really appreciate Val Kilmer's performance because Val Kilmer could not be arsed to do anything. I've never seen a lead actor in a movie look more bored. And it's so weird because Val Kilmer can be great, especially if you've seen the Zaz comedy Top Secret, his best work.
He's really good in that. Or at least I thought so when I was 18. I don't know. I haven't seen it since. But
rest assured, it holds up. If Val Kilmer's performance, it's a star-making performance. Most actors only wish they had a performance that good in their filmography. But Val Kilmer, here he's at the height of his fame. Arguably, this is the start of the downward slide. And he just looks miserable. He is pretty and disappointed. That's the best way I can describe him whenever he's on screen.
So I've just realized that I think there's something else I know about these movies. Batman and Robin is the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yes.
And he says, "Ice to meet you" at some point.
He says, "Say ice." He says, "Ice to meet you." He says, "This is the chilling sound of your doom," which is frankly a bit of a stretch. And he barks at one point, "What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age," and shoots people with a laser gun that makes them frozen. Not unlike the Gamera movie that wasn't.
Now, there are many people who are masters of the craft of the pun, as we talked about in a different podcast entirely. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Arnold Schwarzenegger is one of them.
Oh, no. Arnold Schwarzenegger is definitely pun of them. Because post-kill quips and puns are Arnold Schwarzenegger's, 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger's claim to fame. Even more than being a Terminator.
I suppose so. I don't remember that many in Terminator 2.
Yeah, so that's just it. We got to go with the 80s for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Although again, these are more quips, but rather than puns. But how much further do you have to go from a quip to a pun? Not very far, I said.
All right. So you like this movie? You like this movie because of the good puns from Mr. Freeze or whatever he's called.
Well, here's the thing. I have in the past, and I think it's come up on this show, not exactly gone to bat for Batman Robin, but I've always been a little... See? Even I can do it.
Gone to bat?
But the thing about it is that I have always been a little bit, surprised and confused when people have said, "Oh, this is the worst movie ever. This is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, Batman and Robin." That's one of two misconceptions about it, that it's one of the most terrible movies, I initially thought, and the other being that it captures the spirit of the Adam West Batman, which it does not. The Adam West Batman was really fucking funny. But watching the movie again, like as I said, I was always surprised that people said Batman and Robin, one of the worst. And I was like, well, it's so silly and so gaudy. How bad can it be? But those are just the memories of it, Chris. I haven't seen this since like a cable TV airing of it a decade ago. Having freshly rewatched Batman and Robin, it is headache inducing. The neons are turned up to 11. The camera is constantly moving, usually towards George Clooney's dick.
Right. The pole star of this film.
And just everything about the movie can be described as loud and annoying. So but here's the thing. Is Batman and Robin the worst of the 80s, 90s Batman films? I would again say no. Because while it is the most irritating, without a doubt, and the one that script-wise and really all-round had the least chance of being good, I would rather an irritating and over-the-top and annoying mess than the blandness of Batman Forever, which slips in a little bit of the silliness, but is still trying to commit to the Burton thing, albeit half-heartedly.
Right.
And I can kind of appreciate the fact that, like, Batman and Robin is like stepping on a Lego or stubbing your toe. It's incredibly painful, and it goes away, and it leaves an impression on you. Batman Forever is just having a boring day at work.
Well, thank you for telling me which of these two movies that I plan to avoid for the rest of my life I should avoid more.
Well, we're getting close to the end. Is there anything else that we can say about monsters, big or small?
Well, here's just one more thing. So we talked about that meeting with Eiichi and the scientists, where Eiichi is spilling out all this information that he's gleaned about Gaos, and in particular, that he's calling it Gaos because that's the sound it makes.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, because his name is the sound he makes, I'm going to make an argument that Gaos is a Pokemon.
Now, I hate to, I think, pull the rug out from what I think is a very compelling argument. But Pokemon, of course, is a portmanteau of Pocket Monster.
Yes.
Now, whose pocket does Gaos fit into?
But there are Pokemon who are really large. You have to capture them into the Pokeball, and then they fit in your pocket.
Okay. Well, yeah, the judges will allow it. There's no reason a dog can't play basketball.
Now, I'm a bit too old to have grown up playing the Pokemon games or watching the anime. Are you too old for that nonsense, or did you grow up with the Pokemons?
It's weird. I would say that I am too old because by the time Pokemon became a thing, I had no interest in it. I did catch it on TV on occasion, just because it aired early enough. I would just be having breakfast, and that happened to be on while I was flipping through channels, so I'd catch the odd minute of it here or there. But yeah, I'm not a big Pokemon guy. Although everyone I know of all ages seems to have a fondness for the games, which I've never played, and of the Pokemon Go app, which is still a thing.
Yeah, I know some people who are still deep into the Pokemon Go app. The only Pokemon game that I've played is Pokemon Snap.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
which was terrific. You just wander around taking photos of all the different Pokemon and trying to sort of do things to cause them to poke their heads up or whatever. It was really a lot of fun. It was pretty quick. It was pretty great. I would like to play it again. I would like them to come up with a new Pokemon Snap. Please. That is what I would like. I don't want Pokemon Go. I don't care about Sword and Shield. That's what I want.
Yeah, not to mention there's the irresistible possibility of calling it Pokemon Snaps Back.
Nice. But this is the other thing, that everybody, I think, should have a favorite Pokemon. Whether they care about Pokemon or not, you just pick one and cling to it. And in case it ever comes up at a dinner party or something, you can talk about your favorite Pokemon a little bit. It's a very important social skill. And so, Adam, I want to know, even though you're not super into the Pokemons, do you have a favorite Pokemon?
Oh, the answer is obviously yes.
Good. Which one is your favorite one?
Well, as is often the case, no matter what age I am always a sucker for villains. And so, my favorite Pokemon is Meowth, the wise guy, New York accented fella who looks like a big doofy cat who hangs around with Team Rocket, who themselves are quite doofy. So, I'm a big fan of them, but I would like to give an honorary shout out to Lou Bega as another favorite Pokemon.
Wait a minute. I think I know where that comes from.
Yes, because I actually caught this one aired. Like I said, I never watched the Pokemon anime that seriously. In fact, I was one of those guys who was so Pokemon. I was someone who lacked such Pokemon knowledge that I thought the games were just based on a hit cartoon and not the other way around. But at this point, I'm not watching cartoons. I'm too old even for the relatively good WB Batman cartoons that are on at this point, also airing on Kids WB. But one Saturday morning, not to be confused with ABC's One Saturday Morning, they decided to host the entire Saturday morning block of cartoons with special host Lou Bega of Mambo No. 5 fame.
Sure.
And he spent the entire morning singing about cartoons to the tune of Mambo No. 5, particularly just pairing Pokemon together.
Yep.
And it was the most banal and crass cross-promotional thing I could ever witness at that time. And my jaw just kind of dropped. I couldn't believe that something that silly was happening before my very eyes as I was eating my Count Chocula cereal. But those are my answers. What about you? What's your favorite Pokemon?
Well, it's a pretty easy one. My favorite Pokemon is a big sweetheart of a Pokemon. It's Snorlax.
Oh, yeah.
Do
That's good.
you know Snorlax?
Yes. Yes, because Snorlax is big and he sleeps.
Yes.
I assume he has a comical anime snot bubble coming out of his nose at different points.
I assume so as well, because I didn't watch the anime either.
Now, what exactly stirs your heart about old Snorlax?
Well, I guess it's because I first met him in Pokemon Snap, where he's just very, very sleepy, and you sort of throw an acorn at him or something. I don't remember. It was 20 years ago. But you bonk him on the head, and he just kind of wakes up a little bit, and you can quickly take a picture, and then he's like, and he goes back to sleep. And I respect that. I think he looks very sweet and very cute, and I don't know anything about how he plays in the game or what he was like in the anime, but he's just adorable.
Now, one thing that I will say, the one bit of the games that I do know is I think it's the original Pokemon game for Game Boy. And I saw the sprite for Bulbasaur, and I kind of fell in love with it because of how sad it looks.
Oh, yes.
It's like, oh. So Bulbasaur looks like he's about to be audited, and that kind of made me relate to him a little bit. I felt for him for his just common disappointment.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've got a favorite Pokemon, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you. For as little as $1 an episode, just $1 an episode, you can help us research and record the show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/63.
So Gamuary's over, right?
Well, Gamuary is under the sea for a little while, trying to heal itself up for a bit for the next phase of its battle, but I think we won't have to deal with that for about a year.
Yay! I mean, oh, how sad.
This was your idea.
Yes, and I've come to regret it.
Well, it's better than doing them all in one go.
Yes, that's probably for the best. But that leaves the question, is what great monster are we going to talk about next time?
Well, next time, the great monster that we'll be discussing is public television.
Ooh.
Or maybe it's Raul Julia, because we'll be doing Season 8, Episode 22, Overdrawn at the Memory Bank.
Ah, a fan favorite. Well, this will be fun. I haven't watched this one in a long time.
Oh, I have watched it recently, and it is a fan favorite in as much as I am a fan, and it's one of my favorites. I will be happy to talk about it.
Yeah, so talk about we shall, but albeit that'll be in February because Raul Julia is for lovers.
Yes, he's attractive. He's an attractive guy. I mean, he was.
You could argue that he was the sexier Gomez Adams. You'd be wrong. It's John Aston.
I mean, they both have their charms, and do I ship? I don't not ship.
I mean, if I was forced with that dilemma, I would just say, boys, please, you could both have me.
Yes. Take turns. Okay, well, until next time.
Next time on this show, we'll be eating Raul.
Because half of what I say is meaningless. Take it away, Theme Squad.